Give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want. Your weekly movement news roundup. It's the 26th of November 2021. You're joining us for Give the People What They Want, brought to you from People's Dispatch and its two co-editors, Prasanth in Delhi and Zoe in beautiful Tegucigalpa, Honduras. I'm Vijay from Globetrotter. Lots of news to bring you, getting right to the point. About 20 hours ago, a coup began to unfurl in the country of the Solomon Islands north of Australia, just to the east of Papua New Guinea, a sovereign country where the Prime Minister has been under threat. The Governor General has declared a curfew, an emergency. Protesters surrounding the main government buildings on fire, particularly, and this is significant, buildings of people of Chinese descent. A lot revolves around the fact that people of Chinese descent over the past 2 years have been targeted by groups that have called themselves Malaita for Democracy. Malaita for Democracy. The entire Manasseh Sogavare, the Prime Minister, the entire movement against Prime Minister Sogavare began in September 2019, when Solomon Islands decided to no longer recognize the country of Taiwan as the representative of China, and instead to represent the People's Republic, to recognize the People's Republic of China as the legitimate heir to the seat in the United Nations, and so on. When Mr. Sogavare's government recognized Beijing, a movement developed backed by the United States and the Australians. In fact, US Senator Marco Rubio plays a role here, building up Zionist Christian forces to attack, in the one instance, the government of Mr. Sogavare, on the other instance, to go after Chinese nationals and people of Chinese descent in the Solomon Islands. This is very chilling because the United States and Australia have allied with right-wing factions inside Solomon Islands, essentially to destabilize the country. Please follow what I'm saying. There is no internal political problem in Mr. Sogavare's government. He was elected by a democratic process. Nobody contests the fact that he has to finish his mandate. This is not a contested fact. Mr. Sogavare's government hasn't done anything to provoke a coup of this kind. In other words, there is no dramatic economic law against landlords or something like that, which would bring landlords into the streets and so on. There is no provocation other than the mere fact that in September 2019, the Solomon Islands decided to recognize the government in Beijing. That was sufficient. Now, right after this coup attempt began to unroll in the capital city of Honiara, Australian troops landed in the airport in Honiara, the so-called Self-Defense Force. Australian Prime Minister Mr. Scott Morrison made a statement that the troops would be there for weeks. He has designated the word weeks. Now, it's important to recall that weeks can go on. After all, it's not a question that after 10 weeks, 20 weeks, 30 weeks, it's still weeks. Even 100 weeks later is still weeks. So he has not actually put a deadline. Furthermore, speaking to people in Honiara, I discovered that many people fear, that there will be a new detachment of Australian troops, this time not just the self-defense police type troops, but military. This is quite a sensitive issue. Does Australia have the right to enter a sovereign country? Where is the role of the United Nations? Where is the outcry that a democratically elected government is here being pushed aside in a coup attempt? Not much is being said about this around the world. We are going to follow this at People's Dispatch, at Globetrotter, and of course next week at Give the People What They Want. A serious matter in Solomon Islands. This is perhaps not only for the Solomon Islands, but this is perhaps a new kind of paradigm that we're going to look at. Countries, especially small countries, that make sovereign decisions, having the decisions overturned by these kind of coup attempts and then intervention by foreign powers, in this case, the military of Australia. We're going to move from one coup in the Solomon Islands, not exactly a finished coup, but an attempted coup in the Solomon Islands, to another coup, the coup in Sudan. Prashant, what's happening in Sudan?
Right, Vijay. It's interesting you pointed the dichotomy here, because the coup in Sudan is not over either, because the contest is still on, and we'll talk a bit more about it. So the immediate the developments of the last week fairly well reported the fact that Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, who was overthrown in the October 25th coup by the military, has now been reinstated as part of an agreement he signed with the military. Now, this is a very interesting agreement, especially the fine print, because while Hamdok has been reinstated, there has been welcoming noises from the West, the United States, and other countries. The important thing to note, of course, is that Hamdok does not bring the political force which initially supported him back into the government. So Hamdok is going to be head of a government of technocrats. Important word to note, of course, that technocrats always mean that there is no politics, which clearly is really what the military is going for over here. So Hamdok is going to be heading a government of independent experts, the Forces of Freedom and Change, which were centrist forces, not left forces, not radical forces, centrist forces which struck a compromise with the military in 2019 to form a government. Even they have been excluded from the new agreement, and they have, in anger, rejected Hamdok, although apparently there are moves underneath to try to support him. So yesterday, that's Thursday, saw another massive round of protests against both the coup and the agreement between Hamdok and the military, protesters calling it a betrayal, a compromise of cowardice, many such terms, calling the old slogan, the people call for the fall of the regime, which echoed through all of Northern Africa in the 2011 protests, very much finding resonance in Sudan as well. So the important thing to note here, of course, is that the finer details of the agreement, as reported by our colleague Pawan, points out that the agreement, in this agreement between Hamdok and the military, Hamdok basically agrees that there was no coup on October 25th. So while the army, the military led by Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, dissolved the transitional government, took complete power, nonetheless, the fine print of the agreement basically says that the army chief took action depending on the circumstances or cognizant of dangers posed to national security. Those are the exact words. So what we have is basically a move by Hamdok to legitimize the coup. Now, Hamdok has, of course, claimed that this is to prevent further bloodshed. This is to protect the Sudanese blood is precious, is what he said. But the important question here is, why is blood being shed? Blood is being shed because the military and the security forces are firing on people. At least 42 people have been killed since October 25th when the coup took place. These were not people who just died randomly on the streets. These were people who were shot, who were attacked. So clearly, when the Prime Minister says that blood has to be, blood is precious, lives have to be preserved, the responsibility of that lies in the military which conducted the coup. The responsibility of that lies with Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, the leader, and other generals. So right now, what has happened is basically that the position of the left, which is the Sudanese Communist Party, the Sudanese Professionals Association, that's a confederation of trade unions, who from 2019 have been arguing that the military cannot be trusted, who have been arguing that the military will sooner or later force its way back into power and remove all civilian elements. This position has been vindicated yet again. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways, because for a long time, people were comfortable, dismissing them as radicals and extremists who could just not take a compromise. Sudan was supposedly on the path back to civilian government. But this October 25th coup by the military has basically proved that they're right. And even the centrist forces are now taking to the streets, protesting against this agreement. So from what we've heard from reporters, from reports on the ground, what we've heard is that there is mass rejection from all sections of protesters of this agreement between Prime Minister Hamdok and the military. So definitely protests set to escalate. Yesterday was one major round. We can definitely see more and more protests. One danger here is that the Western powers, the international community, might use this to sort of legitimize the coup. Okay, we have a civilian figurehead back in power, so that's a good sign. So let's reduce the pressure on the military. Let's take it for granted. So that's one big risk that the protesters are worried about. But they also know that they've never really received much solidarity anyway, and they're very determined that they're going to continue this fight.
We started the show today, Prashant, with Solomon Islands, where a coup began just about 20 hours ago. We've moved into a coup that, well, has been ongoing in Sudan for now some time. Both these coups, in one sense, unfinished because nobody has actually acknowledged that the coup has legitimacy. Neither in Solomon Islands, in less than 24 hours, nor in Sudan over the course of several months. There was a coup in Honduras in 2009. In many respects, that coup also is an unfinished coup. People have not come to terms with it. There's been an attempt at the ballot box to overcome that coup. Zoe, you are in Tegucigalpa. You've been meeting people all across Honduras. What is happening with the coup that exists in the Honduras and in the elections that perhaps might finally overturn it?
Well, it's been an interesting week. I arrived in Honduras on Saturday, and since then have been, traveling to different parts of the country, meeting with different leaders and activists in Honduras, hearing their perspectives about what these 12 years since the coup have really meant, and what these elections on Sunday, mean to the country. I think you're exactly right in the sense that, this coup happened in 2009 in June, and the democratic order in Honduras has not been restored. And so there have been 3 electoral processes, but they have all been, considered by and large to be illegitimate in the sense that not only in the vote counting was there fraud committed. I mean, many of us will remember 2017 elections where there was, people, hundreds of thousands of names invented and these votes coming in from regions where there weren't people, and overturning the irreversible trend of the opposition winning against the far-right National Party. This, of course, led to mass protests. But, this is a continuation of what's been happening, is that once the coup happened, it was, approved by the international community, by the United States, and the National Party was able to cement itself in the institutions of the, Honduran state. And since then, it's really hard to say that there has been democracy in the country, because from every element, from campaign financing coming from drug trafficking, from, silencing the opposition through incarceration and through assassination. Of course, the case of Berta Cáceres is one of the most well-known, but there are, dozens of people in Honduras who have been killed over the past 12 years through decimating the public sector, denying people the right to education and the right to healthcare, and just destroying all possibility of them to have futures in the country. This is also part of this continued coup against the people and the denial of, their right to democracy and their right to be able to live in peace. And so I think there's a lot of anticipation about the elections on Sunday. But one thing is very clear for the people is that even if the vote is clean, what's been happening leading up to the elections is really atrocious. I mean, because the opposition is polling so favorably, the National Party has resorted to, ridiculous tactics, buying people home appliances, directly distributing cash to people on the street. I mean, really, really insane, hard to believe that this could be happening, but it is. And so, hopefully that on Sunday, the vote will be, respected, that there won't be another electoral fraud process. But for really democracy to be restored in Honduras, it's a long, arduous process, one that, social movements have alerted to, that has much more to do with, refounding the country and rethinking the structures, the institutions, which have been all subverted and, through the coup, of course, capturing, the judicial branch, capturing, so many different bodies of the state and turning them against the people in favor of, transnational corporations. And so, hopefully the winds of change will be victorious in Honduras. That is by and large, speaking to anyone on the street, it doesn't matter if they're, a far right, a left activist, progressive. Everyone wants change. The situation is untenable. Migration is at rates unheard of. Then the conditions that people are suffering are just no longer possible. They want change. They need change. And if there is no change there, they really fear what's going to happen. A lot of people have already spoken about waves of migration going to pick up in a very big way. The U.S. doesn't want this. The regional countries don't want this. And so, we'll see what happens on Sunday. And hopefully, by and large, the vote will be respected and that the process of restoring democracy in this country can begin.
I think people need to go to peoplesdispatch.org, immediately bookmark the page. Zoe has been covering the elections, talking to social movement leaders, did an interview, very good interview with Padre Melo. Highly recommend the stories there. And of course, Zoe, since you are in Honduras and have been traveling around, you will be giving us a sense of what's happening there. This is an election coming right after the election in Chile, right after the election in Venezuela. As we say on this show, give the people what they want, which is news about Latin American elections. So there we have it. Now, all across the world, just as the Latin Americans keep going to the ballot box, workers in many parts of the world have been on strike. There was a major strike of South African workers who work in the kind of Walmart of South Africa. There have been workers in India on strike just a few days ago, partly in solidarity with the farmers whose struggle continues despite a major surrender government of Narendra Modi. There's been a strike wave that we've seen in places like Tunisia and so on. Endless strikes. Of course, the epicenter, it seems to me, Prashant, is on the largest retailer in the world, and that is Walmart. This Walmart struggle, tell us about it.
You're being very kind, Vijay, and sparing the actual biggest culprit here, which is Amazon. But of course, today is a historic day in the sense that it's what's called Black Friday, the massive sales bonanza that takes place in the US, many other countries, of course. Coming soon is what is called Cyber Monday, another big round of sales. And I think over the past few years, you sort of crossed a particular moment where I think across the world, people have realized that Amazon is a problem. Many big tech companies are a problem, but Amazon especially is a problem because during the pandemic, it became a $1 trillion company, a $3 trillion company. And Jeff Bezos became the first person to become to have a net worth of $200 billion. And if you look at the amount of taxes they pay, the kind of work conditions, a lot of this has been extensively reported. And, of course, for instance, Amazon workers not being able to get bathroom breaks, or for the matter that Amazon has, say, prevented unionization in many parts of the world. The most recent incident being the Bessemer warehouse in Alabama. Just one warehouse organizing was such a big threat for such a multi-trillion-dollar company. But the key question, I think, across the world has been how do we sort of fight back in a world where, say, Amazon is so representative of the kind of world we have today. It is the network it has stretching across countries where products are made and dispatched, and there's no single manufacturing point. There's huge warehouses. There's so much of commerce. At this point, really, people, the big question was how do we sort of fight back against such a giant like Amazon, despite its very problematic practices. Incidentally, I think it pays just about 1% tax or something in the US. So I think one of the interesting things over the past few years has been this coalition that has emerged. It's called the Make Amazon Pay Coalition. And what it has been able to do is, I think, unite a variety of, organizations, unite a variety of platforms, unite a variety of ideas, and present it as a single campaign against this behemoth. Now, for instance, we know that Amazon treats its workers badly. There's been a lot of reports about that. We know that it indulges in union-busting tactics. We know that it has deals and agreements with countries which are horrible human rights records, with companies which are huge polluters in their own right. We know that there have been multiple other kinds of violations in the world which put small producers at risk. So what this coalition is basically brought together is all these interests, presenting a series of demands to Amazon, starting from something as basic as say increasing pay, giving a more clear appraisal system, a performance review system, to even slightly more complex topics like how Amazon handles data, or how Amazon Web Service works with companies which are massive polluters, or demanding more action from the company itself, its core functionalities in terms of climate change. So this is the kind of platform that has come up in the form of Make Amazon Pay. I believe at least 20 to 25 countries actions have either taken place or are going to take place throughout the course of today. These include garment workers in Bangladesh. These include, say, workers in the United Kingdom who have been trying to organize. These include coalitions of IT employees and Amazon workers in various parts of the world. A number of important trade unions, big trade unions actually, which have been fighting in the forefront of workers' rights. In Italy, for instance, both CCOBAS is part of it. CGIL earlier won a victory against Amazon as well. And in South Africa, again, a very big protest taking place, activists in India, Australia, so many other places. So what we actually see is this is something that probably provides hope, because we are also, this kind of a campaign shows that the tide is perhaps turning. Now, Jeff Bezos went to space recently, of course. He thanked the workers of Amazon, which is really the heights of chutzpah, for lack of a better word. But I think what we're seeing right now is the building blocks of what could soon become a much larger campaign. We do know that in response to the pandemic, there's been a decision in principle to impose a 15% tax on big corporates across the world. Whether it'll actually be implemented, something that remains to be seen. It was actually a dilution from the original proposal, which is much higher. But what has been happening over the years is that multinational corporations have basically been able to twist laws, labor laws, regulatory laws across the world, and actually entrench and embed themselves in such a way that they actually spend the least amount of money. So in some senses, Make Amazon Pay is at one level paying the workers for the work they're doing, but also in some senses paying back to the world for the amount of profit it has been able to extract over the course of the years. So that's actually, I think, the heart of this campaign. It's really inspiring to see that such a wide variety of people are able to, from such a wide variety of sections, are able to mobilize against such a big company. And Amazon has kind of become ubiquitous for many of us, continues to be so. I mean, that I don't think is going to change. But the fact that there is this growing wave of awareness could actually mean that in the coming months and years, we see something which is, we see, and if people can do something with Amazon, the hope is that the same might happen with Google and Facebook, who are also facing their own sets of challenges. So can we envision a world where big tech can be regulated through global coalitions? Because it's increasingly clear that individual countries can't do it. There is no political will. They have too much money to throw at various causes, at political parties. Definitely not the case. But can global coalitions of this sort be what, sort of are able to at least halt the advance of some of these big tech companies? I think that's one of the big questions that we need to see in the coming months and years.
It's true. We have to see. That's Prashant from People's Dispatch. Important place to go and learn about strikes all around the world, social movements of different kind. Other co-editor of People's Dispatch, Zoe Alexandra, sitting in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. If you took a flight from Tegucigalpa and just flew directly eastward, you'd land in the Dominican Republic, where in 1960, 3 sisters, Mirabel sisters, were killed because they were against the dictatorship of Trujillo. 1999, important day was set in honor of them. That day was the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Zoe, tell us a little bit about the day. Well, we should honor the Mirabel sisters and all people who fight against dictatorships, but tell us a little about the day and what has been happening in the 16 days that follow the 25th of November.
I mean, I think it's very fitting that you shared the story, about why these Mirabal sisters were assassinated by the dictatorship of Trujillo in Dominican Republic, because I think that really sets the tone for what this day means, because it's about commemorating and fighting, against violence against women, and women who are in struggle. Not only women who are in struggle, but every day, women, especially as many feminist organizations, women's organizations have seen throughout the pandemic, women are really holding up society. How would we have gotten through, and how are many countries continuing to get through this lockdown, this, moment of economic paralysis, of deepening of inequalities, if women were not, carrying out, the reproductive labor that they are always, doing in society. And so I think this day has been of utmost importance, specifically in Latin America, because it's where it's been most commemorated, and a moment to come out onto the streets in struggle, because, the feminist struggle is one of street action, of mass mobilization, of coming together in, joy and also in mourning. As I mentioned, of course, the pandemic has deepened a lot of these inequalities. And with it, there's also been, of course, increases in femicides, violence against women. With the crisis of capitalism deepening, becomes an even more pressing matter. These things have not gone away. Patriarchal violence is a part and parcel of the capitalist system. And so, this day is one of struggle, of fighting against capitalism, of fighting against patriarchy, and of reaffirming the importance of these struggles. So, across the continent, and, and it's starting to be recognized again, of course, across the world as well. And last year, because of the pandemic, there weren't as many mobilizations, but this year we saw people once again take the streets. In Brazil, the landless rural workers movement, which has a very, very strong women's sector, was on the streets in several cities, demanding, of course, an end to the patriarchal violence, which is seen in the homes, in the workplace, but also, the overwhelming patriarchal violence of the Bolsonaro government. In Honduras as well, women were out in the streets. The dictatorship has been one that's been extremely violent against women. They've been some of the most affected by the policies of the National Party. And so it's just an important day of struggle, and leading up to Human Rights Day, I think was what you're referring to, on December 10th, which is, these two really crucial moments of remembering what are our, fundamentals, and what are we fighting for, and what is going to allow us to chart a course towards a more just world, where everyone can live in equality and dignity and have dignified lives. And I think, today, Vijay, I know you're going to talk about it now, but I think the plan to save the planet is, part of this struggle, and is part of about our, role as movements and as, people on the left to really build towards.
Well, Zoe, you're sitting in Tegucigalpa, where there's a beautiful sky above your head, and that beautiful sky above your head, of course, is our horizon. Struggles by people like the Mirabel sisters, and then those that fought to get, in 1999, the establishment of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and then all the people that continue to agitate on these 16 days that are conventionally regarded as the days of human rights, from November 25th, the International Day to eliminate violence against women, all the way to Human Rights Day, December 10th. We've, I suppose, forgotten that we have a foundation to make a better world. So 26 research institutes got together under the leadership of Sasha Laurenti, the Secretary General of ALBA TCP. That's the old treaty created at the initiative of Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez in 2004. Well, these 26 research institutes have produced a document. You can download the document from thetricontinental.org. I know that People's Dispatch will also have a story about the big launch event that was held, in fact, today, where we had leaders like João Pedro Stedil from the landless workers movement give a very, very pointed and important reflection. We had people from the World March on Women. We had people from La Via Campesina. We had people from movements all around the world, Socialist Movement of Ghana and so on, give their very important intervention about the nature of this plan, which is not so much a plan, but a set of principles on which to struggle. Struggles, for instance, of the Amazon workers, about whom Prashant had been speaking before. Friends, you're listening to Give the People What They Want, which is what we hope you want. And we come to you from two projects. We come to you from People's Dispatch, and that's where Prashant and Zoe are the co-editors. People's Dispatch, for my money, not much money, but for my money, is the best movement driven news reporting out there. And I really would like you to go and support People's Dispatch. I'm coming to you from Globetrotter. We're with you every single Friday. Every Friday. We're here with you, for you. Let us know what you think about our show. We like hearing from you. We want to learn from you. See you next week.